The
Good.
work they do on the gouging, I've been working with them, and then they stop working with me, and then they work again with me. And they don't have the tools for bassoon because there is no monetary enough. You know, they
Mm-hmm.
dedicate the whole budget for the clarinets and saxophones.
Of course, yeah.
And if they might have just, I know it's expensive, but one machine, I think one of
Mm-hmm.
the best canes. Is so gentle, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, exactly.
it's not harsh, it's not hard. Uh, so it's very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's always cheap because of the money exchange, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
in a way, it's a good deal. My students usually play with that because, of course, with
Yeah.
money issues. And for us, you know, buying Dancy like that is sort of like
No,
a monthly salary. You know,
yeah,
it's really.
no, 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 of course. And the dance is less reliable now, unluckily.
I
And
know.
so the only thing when you try to buy Gonzalez Arkendonax from here, they charge in dollars. So it
No,
becomes immediately very expensive.
Carlo, I said we can do. You know, I order it from here and I send it to you. Just let me know whenever you want to do that.
And the
Because
profiling, is it good now? The
no, I don't like
better.
how they work the cane.
Mm,
I
mm, mm.
it's been a while since I saw my machines. I just have a tip, you know, machine from this
Yes,
Dutch guy,
yes, yes, yeah.
Don Arts is very good. But then I don't like the work they do. You know, it's not taking care of. You know, we would like to.
Yes, yes.
But the tubes, I remember working with the tubes, and they're amazing. They're amazing.
Ah,
Carl, let me introduce everybody in Spanish
yes,
because
with
if not,
pleasure.
they're gonna think they're in the wrong Zoom. Hola, ¿cómo están? ¿Cómo andan todos? Bienvenidos, bienvenidas.
Hola.
Hola, hola. Eh, bueno, se pueden mutear. Yo empiezo este segundo encuentro del ciclo de conversatorio entre fagotistas, organizado por la Universidad Nacional de las Artes. Es un ciclo que consta, como ustedes saben, con el permanente apoyo de nuestra decana, la licenciada Cristina Vázquez, y el trabajo extraordinario de producción y difusión a cargo de la licenciada Lucía Gallini. Ambas nos acompañan hoy. Bueno, obviamente estoy profundamente agradecido con ellas lo saben bien. Hoy es un día muy especial para mí. Todos los invitados son invitados de lujo y mi agradecimiento es eterno. Realmente ceder un tiempo como el que están cediendo es realmente increíble. Pero el invitado de hoy es un invitado que yo conozco hace muchísimo tiempo, que tengo un cariño, un amor profundo y un respeto como pocos. Es una persona que ama lo que hace como pocos, conoce la profesión como pocos y sobre todo la comparte, y eso es único. Estoy hablando del maestro italiano Carlo Colombo, solista de la Ópera de Lyon, profesor del Conservatorio Nacional Superior de Música de Lyon también, recientemente profesor del Conservatorio de Música de Lausanne en Ginebra, en Suiza, y obviamente es invitado y a todos los festivales más prestigiosos de música de la actualidad. La charla de hoy la voy a dar en inglés. No se asusten que gracias a un trabajo de edición de la universidad después va a haber subtítulos. Obviamente para los que precisan una mayor comprensión. Espero ser claro en un inglés que no hablo mucho, pero bueno, lo importante es intentar a ver qué es lo que sucede. Carlo, sorry for keep you waiting. I was introducing you in Spanish. My fantasy of learning Italian is still far away, so we'll do it in English. What a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for
It's a
sharing with
pleasure.
us your time and your knowledge. I know you're a very busy man, and at the same time you're a very caring man. So every time I remember need something, you were there, and once again, you know, you show your cariño, you know, your
No, 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 è reciproco. It's a pleasure for me, honor to meet you all. And if my English with an Italian accent is too quick or anything, just let it stop and we can come back. And if you have any questions also, of course, don't hesitate to talk and let me know.
Okay, you know that I was thinking before getting into this this chat. I always come to the same topic. You know how hard it is for all of us to go through a period of time that we have no background. You know, we don't know what's going on actually in a way, and we don't know what's going to happen. And for us who are in the art community, I believe, not egoistic, but in a way, since we want to express every time, or we decided to live from that expression, sort of we are suffering in a different way, but a lot. And in this community, I believe the ones who are suffering the most are the students. From my perspective as a teacher as well, they lost contact with the people who, in a way, give them motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of having you is sort of to plug them with some great energy that you always give us. So what do you think if we go directly to one topic that everybody's going to be very happy to hear from you, which are, for example, some strategies of daily practice? How would you approach that sort of practice? Is it
Yes,
all right?
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. Of course, this is a strange period, and I would take it as a chance, in a way, to be able to go back to fundamentals in the daily practice, because you know, in normal life we are always running from one thing to the other, and we have to prepare new pieces. We have to be ready for anything, and so we sort of, at least myself, I try to oblige myself to have time for basics, and I believe that's a good strategy to last long in the profession, because it's like a sportsman or sportwoman. You have to keep training if you want to not to go down too quickly with your results. So if you take the example of the cello or the violin, of course you work left hand, but you work also the right hand, the bowing, and this is for us is the air, the speed of air, the control of attack, of the beginning and the end of the note. This is for me an important point, because you will need this in the orchestra as much as possible, and also you will need it. For example, you come in for an orchestral audition and you have to start playing, and we always excuse ourselves when we are on stage. In a way, we excuse to be there, we excuse us to breathe in and to breathe out. So we have to find a way, at least me and I guess many other people, we have to find a way that at a certain moment we don't use our brain anymore, because we have used it before, and we use only what we have trained for. So the physical part of breathing and expelling the air. So I would certainly be an advocate of long notes most of the and you can have different kind of long notes. What I find useful for myself, if I have a concert here and I start preparing here, this part, most of the time is technical, and then from here to here is more air practice, and trying not to be I would you say not to try to think anymore on what you should do, but just try to do it. And so if I work slowly for the technique from here to here, I work less slowly to be able to decontract and to relax and get used to go and play without stopping the circle in a way. So for me, breathing is a circle. And the important thing is that you don't, if this is the read when you breathe, this has to go even faster than the gesture here, because there is a resistance, and we have to understand that we need a little bit of resistance, because then we know how we can push. Of course, if the reed is too resistant, then we lose staccato. So it is a compromise. But in the tenor, often, if the reed is too easy, then is not so. The attacks are a bit not good. What I do, so for long notes, for example, one thing I find useful is to play as long as I can, as steady as I can, and then I try to count seconds, maybe 20, 25, depends on the register, of course. In the low notes, you empty yourself quicker because the tube is long and there is more space. In the tenor, you can, in the high notes, you can hold much longer. And I would do this every day, like, daily prayers. I would do at least 1 octave chromatic. If you can do more, it's always useful. And one important thing that also is important, I find for myself, is not to do always the same things, because after a while, at least I don't hear myself anymore. I don't listen. I mean, I hear myself, but I don't listen to myself. This is the difference, It means that I just blow in the bassoon and my brain is somewhere else. And so no Facebook, no telephone, no anything. Stay in, if you want, in a dark room, no light, but so you are concentrated. And I see that if I do this, after 40 minutes about, I'm dead. I need to have some rest. So then I go out, I take my telephone, and I have a little interaction with human beings, and then I go back to work. This is also useful. I find that you organize your work well, your daily work. So for the long notes, I would do this long, as long as I can. And you will see that after a while, you will be able to hold it more. And this is always good, because often we breathe too often, in fact, in a phrase. We should be able to organize the breathing in a musical way, and not in the French would say à la seule qui peut. It means that please help me, or something like this. Yeah, anytime. Another strategy for long notes is to do from piano to forte, and then stop, and then to forte to piano. This will help for the beginning of the notes, and then this forte to piano is very good for working on diminuendos. And this is part of what we are asked from in the music. If we have a good musical conductor, it will accompany you and let you finish the note. In some places, of course, Tchaikovsky fourth. I would think maybe also there's a very beautiful small solo of Tchaikovsky or Onegin just before the aria of the letter of Onegin. And they And then the tenor comes in, and it's fantastic G. You could also, there is this fantastic. You can hear it on YouTube with Fritz Wunderlich, for example. It's written. More you look for diminuendos, more you understand which kind of reed you need, and this will improve your reed make. Because it is a compromise. We have to accompany. Of course, we have to press a little bit, but more do. My tongue goes down and I open here because I need to give more space. If I don't open, the pitch goes up. More you open, more you need to blow because the cavity is bigger. So you might try when you will drive or you have with the car, if you are in a steep road and you stop and you have to start and you don't want to use handbrake, you have to compensate the, I don't know how do you call this in English, but and the accelerator. And this is exactly the same thing we have to learn. If you are a good driver, you can keep your car steady doing this. If you do give too much gas, it goes and then it stops. If you don't give enough, you go down. This is the same thing with the blowing in the diminuendo. If you don't give enough speed, then there is the note ends. And if you give too much, you don't make a diminuendo. So it is very good exercise. It is a good exercise for me. Another thing I find very useful for myself is to make attacks with no tongue. I would say from the middle A, la do di do di do di of Figaro, la do di la do, that one, till I E. Try, of course, there will be more resistance up there, but if you try to just blow with no tongue, you will understand the compromise you need. You can try without the bassoon if you do, and you put an H. After a while, you understand that it is very resistant. I need to give more speed. I have to relax. And it's a very good exercise because often I often hear furtiva lacrima, tu una furtiva lacrima, not una, not a vowel, I hear a consonant. So I found this is, for me, part of my daily practice, because I really find that this improves also my reed making and the more I look for things, more I have to find solutions. So don't accept what just it comes to you. Maybe, and then you can have also some exercises, for example, that I find useful. If you play tenor F, for example, I do quickly, but you make you keep you try to find a good resonance of the F that is a compromise with the position in the mask. How do you use the tongue? How much support you have? Support means speed of the air, quantity and speed. I assume that this is only used to go around the reed. Of course, higher I go, more I advance on the reed, and more I press a little bit. You can't play in the tenor and being like this in the upper register. Of course, don't force yourself to change positions. It's just you can accompany this. So I have another exercise in mind, but at first this one. So if you keep a good ringing F, So you come down in a chromatic scale, and you go again up to the F, and you try to have it ringing again. I do this for weak notes, for example, to understand them, how to keep them in tune. D, tenor, E flat, because the tenor register is the register where we get paid for most of the time. we have the most beautiful solos and the most expressive things. So I would really cherish this register, because it's human voice. And then you will see you can play from a legato from high E to low B flat and go back to high E, I mean super high E. And this, it works. After a while, you find a way to, you relax to go to the low, and then you push and you focus again your air and your embouchure to succeed. Another exercise that could be useful is also to do fortepiano immediately. Bum, bum, because you will see that also here you have to have a compromise to be able to keep going with the air. So it's very easy to lose the note after the fortepiano. One thing I also do is to play chromatic, often in the tenor, but you can do everywhere. But if you play la, I, la, I, so you feel comfortable on the up tone higher, then you can expand it, you can reduce it, so you can do ta ta like you turn the voice on, the volume. But this is very good because it's refined work for control. Of course, you need a reed that does it. So if I have a new reed, I use it to practice technique. So I break it in, and I need a little more advanced reed for the extra supple control. But one thing I do for myself is that I don't practice and scrape the reed at the same time, because if not, I play two notes, I do something, and then I play two notes, and then I do something. Then after 3 times, I've destroyed the reed, and I haven't practiced. So sometimes I decide, okay, I take the worst reed I have, I play on it, and I just move my fingers. Of course, for me, it is very important that you don't have to bite. If the reed makes you biting, then there is a problem with the opening of the reed, or the quantity of the cane on the reed. It is related. More cane on the reed, closer it should be. It depends. Of course, we are all different. We all have different embouchure, but I play quite in front because I like it. It's my natural way, and I can use more vowels inside. If you play here, you can only have the nose sound a little bit here. Instead here, you have a rounder cavity. So if you play more in front, you need a more open reed. If you play near to the wire, you need less resistance here in terms of opening and hardness. If not, you bite. So the first important thing is not to bite, of course. So you have to find a system that works for you.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
No, I don't know. It's personal, but I think, of course, you have to follow a pattern, you know, after a while you have to understand, you have to experiment and find which is the best for you. And my last crisis till the next one is I play, my reeds are 29 from the first, from the collar blade, and 27 or 26 if I cut it badly in a tube. But I'm using a little larger shape now that I was used before. I use the Tuneman one, or the pseudo Tuneman, and some others. Sometimes I'm going too wide now, especially the tube. But so it's you know, always like this. But I find that it works well for me because I can leave more cane on the reed, more cane on the sides of the reed, and the reed is sharper in pitch, but it holds better the tenor because the vibrations are sharper. You can play flat with a very small reed, and you have to scrape a lot, like some Americans do. They have a very nice sound in a certain dynamics, because the reed is very like butter, you know, it's like a kiss. It's really nice. But if I blow more quicker, then the pitch is less stable unless I really take everything away. And now, luckily we have to play all this French music that goes as high as possible, and for that we need more cane on the back. and so that's a compromise. Definitely, my orchestral reeds are not the same that the solo reeds. But then, so if I have a reed that is comfortable, I practice technique, and if I don't want to work to scrape it, what I'm trying to have is in my reed box is to have new, up new, and old. I call this the desert, traversée du désert, you know, when you have to cross a desert because you don't have anything, if you have only 2 new and then 2 old reeds. This opens it happened to me too many times, and now luckily I'm a bit out of it because I change reeds. After I played a performance, an opera, not a cycle of performances, I don't use it anymore. So I have boxes of halfway reeds or reeds that are played in that I don't use, but I know that they were fairly good. So if it is a crisis time, I can always go and look for them. Crisis time here in where I work is mostly changement of seasons, when it gets very humid, when it gets very cold or very hot. But that's where I go back to my old boxes. If not, I really try to have new reeds every week, and I play on them, but I don't scrape them. I mean, I scrape them before I play, so I can blow in them without destroying myself. And then, as I'm not in a desperate need of reeds, because I have some that I know I can use, I can let them come slowly. I don't, for example, I need to play an important solo in the very high register, and I have a nice reed that plays with soft cane that plays well in the bottom. If I would be desperate, I should cut it, and then I would lose it. I would lose a good chamber music read, and maybe I will not have a high note read anymore. Anyhow, so I try to use the reeds for what they give me. I don't try to tell a reed do that, because it will never work.
Uh-huh.
At least I don't know. You know, these white hairs, they can tell you many things.
It's funny because while I was listening to you saying all these amazing things about, tips for practicing, I was thinking, well, I think there's no doubt that as students, we might have thought that that was it, and that's the hardest part. But the hard part is when you stop being a student and you have like 70% of your bassoon playing left by yourself with no teacher who is on your side, and you have to maintain yourself, what you were saying at the beginning. And most people don't realize that it's just a very short amount of time that you have to take whatever you kind the tools in order to then succeed as a sportman, but with no coach. So in a way, it's a weird thing. That's very helpful what you were saying about how you maintain yourself to play. One quick question I wanted to ask, if you don't mind. I realized playing in an opera and loving the opera all the time, and that's why you are one of my heroes of, dedicated your life playing at the opera. I heard you playing at Lyon. I was lucky enough. And one thing that I was always thinking when I hear you playing is how well you keep in shape all the time, even if you might have been suffering one of your crises at that concert, but nobody noticed, and that's a great goal. But what would you tell to the students? The biggest difference and the quickest difference that you can see between a symphonic job and an opera job, because what I see what I see often is that people don't know, and they are desperate to get a job no matter what and no matter how, but then when they're inside it's like hell. They don't like it, and they become very sort of flat, because either too boring or it's a normal thing. I think you too, you hear those comments. What would you say to the students before taking an opera job, for example, that is or what would you be looking for, if you...
I think depends, of course, on the colleagues and on the conductors. But if you assume they are good, then I would think that in symphonic, good conductors ask for extreme dynamics also in piano. If not, it's just as loud as you can most of the time. So that's the difference with the opera, where is the opposite way. It doesn't mean that you have to play everything pianissimo. It's part of the character of the bassoon that I find that playing in an opera is that you have to understand when you are a protagonist and when you are not. So it's always you have to adapt your dynamic related to the musical things you want to keep out, make them going out from the score. Of course, you have to discuss with the conductor that is always doing this bassoons too loud, but definitely in the opera you need to play less. But good conductors can ask you to play out a lot. So maybe another thing maybe we could talk about for staying in shape is how to practice technique. I find very useful for myself to, as I was saying, alternate exercises. If I always play fa sol la si do re mi fa sol fa mi re do si la si do re fa sol la do mi re do si do re fa sol do, after a while I don't listen to myself anymore. What I found useful for myself is to play what I call proximity technique. So because in France there is this allard method that is very useful, but when you play third, fourth, fifth, sixth, augmented, diminished and stuff, but I thought it's interesting that I can play 2 bars and then my brain is off, and I'm not able to go fast enough to relax. In fact, sometimes if I practice too slowly, I get more tense. So that's why also in your strategy to go to the concert or to the performance is to, if you skip playing too slow till the end, then you will never challenge yourself. More I go to the concert, more I accelerate my speed when I practice. And so if I'm able to play at 75%, 80% of the speed, but relaxed, and I don't feel I'm pushed because I'm not fast enough, then you will see it's not so much to go up to speed. And with adrenaline, often we play faster than what we think. So, for example, I found very simple exercises. You can invent, be creative. You can invent yourself. But for example, a very simple thing is paso, 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 la, sol, la, sol, la, sol, paso, la, sol, la, sol, la, sol, la, sol, la, sol, la, sol, I sing like a dog, but you know, one step up, one, and then go back, and repeat this movement. When you are in the tenor, you play fa sol 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 fa sol. If you try to push or re mi re re mi 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 re, after a while we say con le ciabattatos, ciabattare, like zapatas, no? and also all these connections in the tenor are very, very, very difficult, and that's why I insist on them, and I find them, it's very useful for me to play. You can play si do re do si, then you can play si do re do si do re mi re mi re do re mi re do re mi re do re mi re mi fa mi re re mi fa mi re mi fa mi re mi fa, for example, and you have different possibilities. I try to alternate. Either I start from low B flat, I go as I can. Either you come up chromatically, so you are in B flat major, B major, C major, and you play the same exercise. Sometimes I like to take a tonality and do as many exercises around the same tonality. So, for example, you can play fa sol la sol la sol fa sol la sol fa sol la sol in F major, and then you can play fa sol la sol fa sol la sol fa sol la si do fa sol la si do fa. If you, sometimes I find useful to play fast, very short, to clean. And you can try, especially in the tenor, if you play sol la si bemol, sol la si la sol la si la sol la si la sol la si la sol, or la si do si la si do si la si do, it is it's quite complicated. And to play it clean, because we need quite a bit of activity up there, and to play clean is quite a challenge, I find, at least for myself. And so this could be useful. And then you can play thirds, you can play fourths with the same tonality. Then chromatic, you can do one chromatic scale to up, you can do one octave and come down, and then go back up from one step, and all these things. And then I would do this all legato, and I would give air direction. So it means dynamics. Always crescendo when you go up and diminuendo when you go down. This is the more simple and the more effective, because we need to expand the tenor octave, the third octave. So often I find that more I move my fingers, less I blow. So I always try to remember, tell myself that technique is 60% air and 40% fingers, in a way. And if I want to, also I found it important to have a direction, a points where I know where I can go. I try, you know, you might have been skiing in Bariloche, no. but but if you go down like this and you just pray that you don't crash yourself, it's not a good. That's my technique when I ski, but it's not the best one. It's better to know where you can make your turns. So it means if you have a technical passage, I always try to sing a note that gives me stability. For example, end of Act 1 in Così, si, re mi fa sol, fa mi, re mi fa sol, fa mi, re mi fa sol, la, fa mi, fa sol, mi, do, re mi, re, do, mi, re, fa sol, la, fa mi, fa sol, mi, do, re, do, re, do, re. I always think that and nearly shout it with the air, with the speed of air, and this helps my fingers to focus.
I see we all sing the same happy birthday song all the time.
Absolutely.
Carlo, listen, for me, I told you already, I don't want to bother you with all this flourishing yourself with love and thank, but it's true. Every time I talk to you, you know, you elevate the spirit of whoever is in front of you.
No, this is an exchange.
We've been trying to bring you here, at least from my side, so many times, and it never worked. Yeah. But we'll try in the near future. We need to see each other. You need to see the students. We need to hear you playing and talk live in person. And of course,
it would be such a pleasure. No, it would be such a pleasure.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. I had like 100 questions for you.
Yeah,
we'll discuss it later. You know?
Yeah, you can send them to me, or we can do another time if you like.
Yes, of course. This is just
for the moment. I'm quite free. The orchestra is slowly coming back, and the conservatory will start at the end of the month. So we will discuss together.
Yes.
No, don't forget to practice staccato also. No, sorry.
I thought you would say, don't forget to drink water, but you said, don't forget to drink staccato.
No.
Okay.
No. And of course, it's empanadas and all the things you have done there, and la scamorza alla parriggia.
Everything comes together at the end. Yeah.
Fantastic. The important things.
Thank you for your time, and hopefully we see each other soon. Yeah.
With much pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Good luck to everyone, and keep on with spirit. You are your own teacher sometime, and this is important because it makes you understand what we should do. And of course, Ezekiel is there to help you to go in the right direction, of course.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Un besito.
Ciao, Carlo.
Ciao.
Oh, my love. Bye-bye.
Ciao.